All right, welcome NCFA fans to our 2022 Conference Championship Preview Week. We're going to jump into it, but first we're going to recap what happened in Week 8. That's the last week in the regular season of the NCFA. Let's see what happened. We only had 3 games last week. Starting off in the North Atlantic, we had George Mason make a statement and erase all doubt in the North Atlantic who belongs in that Sacred Heart George Mason North Atlantic Conference Championship game, Dave.
Without a doubt, and to be honest, this was 35-0 at halftime. So, George Mason jumped out to a 14-0 lead after their first 2 drives and just kept piling it on. And I would assume that they probably, played a lot of their second and third string players in the second half, and maybe even had the clock moving a little bit faster than normal for them not to score in the second half. They jumped out all over Coppin State. Coppin State we thought would play a little bit better in this game, but like to your point, there is George Mason without a doubt, right? Not only does this game help them solidify their conference title shot, but it gives them a little boost for a wild card if they were to need it. And it also shows that they've really been peaking. So they started off, they didn't play a couple games first couple of weeks. They had some bye weeks, and then they had that game against Sacred Heart really early where they had a real close loss. And then since then, they've just been peaking, and they're probably playing their best football at the right time. So you often hear that, if you look at Super Bowl winners, wasn't necessarily the best team who won the Super Bowl every year. The team that's playing the best at the end of the year. So Mason might be on that kind of a roll here, and who knows what they'll do this weekend against Sacred Heart.
And we're going to see some of these highlights as we move on through the slides. But first, let's move on to the Great Lakes Conference. We had UW-Milwaukee pitch a shutout against Wright State. Now, UW-Milwaukee isn't a Great Lakes Conference team. They're independent, but this could end up with Milwaukee being a top 10 team in the NCFA.
Yeah, I think most likely they will be a top 10 team. 2 losses. They don't have as many wins as some of the other teams, so I don't really think, although technically they haven't been eliminated from wildcard contention, I struggle to see how they'll grab that 4th seed with just 3 wins and 2 losses. But they're part of this conglomerate of two lost teams that we have kind of floating for that last spot. And the Wright State, kept it close. They've had some games that got out of hand. They obviously won a game here earlier this year. But for them to keep it close against a Milwaukee team that was riding a 2-game win streak, I think was a nice way for them to end their season as they build with a young team, young coaching staff, as they try to build back up to what they were a few years ago.
I'm always interested to see the 9 scores. Is that a touchdown and a field goal, or is it 3 field goals? Like a what? I want to know what happened. But yeah. I'll have to look at the box score for that. And then last week,
safety and an extra point maybe.
Right. Toledo 46-9 against Oakland. I know that was at halftime. That was 12-9, and then Toledo walked away with it.
Yeah, I saw the halftime update. I don't know if it was Toledo social media or Oakland social media had the halftime update, and that's kind of what we expected—a close game, hard-fought game. And then I saw the final score, and I didn't hear a lot about it. Maybe you had some more insight with your connections to Oakland, but I didn't hear maybe what happened. You look at something like that happening, maybe some turnovers or blocked kicks or some stuff weird like that. We know Toledo has an explosive offense. They just put a nice graphic on their social media that they're like the second best offense in the league behind Ohio State with all these numbers. And they've been putting up a lot of points, but 12-9 at halftime would make me think that something weird happened for Oakland in the second half to kind of let it get out of hand.
Yeah, just looking back, because I was up in the booth for that game. The Oakland quarterback Evan Plex crossed the goal line to score on a quarterback sneak, and then the ball hit his helmet, and then Toledo fell on it, and they ruled it a touchback instead of a touchdown. There was like some weird things going on. The first half of the game was played superbly. The second half had a lot of mistakes, a lot of big plays that kind of went Toledo's way, and all credit to Toledo. They knew what they wanted. They went out and got it, and at the second half they really walked away with it. So a credit to Toledo and their win this week.
Yeah, I mean, Toledo wanted to set themselves up for a chance at if Michigan State falters and they have 3 losses, maybe Toledo slides into that 4th spot.
We're going to move on to some highlights. All right, so these are George Mason highlights, and I've got some setups. This clip 1 here is Cole Jasmine passing to Curtis Brooks for a touchdown.
All right, it's going to be a long touchdown because they're down there at about the 15-yard line. So,
Again, Mason in the dark
all
jersey.
right, just a go little post right there, and he run right by the safety who had his eyes in the backfield. I couldn't tell if there was any play action or not. I didn't see it right away, but that's an athlete right there. Nice long strider, big frame, good ball.
And what I really like about this too is right here when I paused it, how the eyes follow the football into the cradle. He completes the catch without worrying about getting hit, without continuing to run. He catches the ball, tucks it away, even though he knows it's a home run ball. It's not a home run if you don't catch it.
Those are some of the toughest ones because he's pretty much wide open. When you get to a college level and above, that's wide open for a post route. So, sometimes those are the ones where you just kind of forget that one and you drop it and you never forget about it for the rest of your life. So that's a nice play for them.
All right, the second clip, we've got Elijah Seiler on a touchdown run.
All right, a little gap scheme right there. Got some nice combo blocks. Big hole for the running back. I don't think he was even touched there. So, again, Mason in the first half was really just controlling this game. So it's easy to tell right here.
And this isn't the Coppin State that we're used to, that's for sure. This clip 3, Cole Jasmine passes to Curtis Brooks for another touchdown. And this looks like a 60-yard touchdown.
60-yarder, so.
A screen.
Yeah, a little screen pass, and he just takes it all the way. So, there's a great athlete right there. And, it does look like, from an athlete perspective, you can really see in this film that Mason just, whether the guys are older, I know Coppin's very young this year, but they have better athletes, it looks like, across the board here, and then that would dictate the score being what it was.
Right.
Nice looking lineman there, too. Some nice size and athletic looking lineman.
I go back to a little bit of pursuit here. The Mason gets a little bit of help from the defense, under pursuing and running behind instead of taking a good angle. The other guy knew it was a touchdown 20 yards before he even got into the end zone.
Yeah, I think some of those guys on the backside assumed somebody else was going to make the tackle. That backside corner probably could have came and made the tackle down the field. But, again, young team, Coppin's a young team. Some of that stuff has got to be coached and preached and over before a guy can do it in a game consistently.
More touchdowns. We've got Cole Jasmine passes to Toby Theron for this touchdown. And this looks like it's about a 20-yard TD.
All right, Cole Jasmine is
out of the spread of the shotgun.
Shotgun, a little pop pass. I think they were expecting run. The box was pretty packed. They're in some man type of coverage. And
here we got one on defense. So Gabe Wilson recovers a fumble in the end zone for a defensive touchdown. They're in a pass formation, the offense. But hard to see from that angle.
Yep, that was a tough one.
We've got 3 more clips. This next one, Darian L. misses his initial opportunity for a tackle for a loss, but does not miss his second attempt. So here's a second effort coming up.
Yeah, right up front, it's Mason is just really dominating Coppin State's offensive line. I think they're bigger, faster guys than Coppin has seen all year to that point. So.
Clip 7, the defensive line flushed the quarterback from the pocket, allowing our outside linebacker, Tro Davenport, to come up with the sack.
Yep, again, just that D-line really getting in there and causing some havoc.
And our last clip is Darian L. with a tackle for a loss coming up.
what you see is you see great pursuit from Mason and a lot of white jersey guys turning and looking because they got beat and didn't sustain blocks. So, it's just a matter of Mason being in a little better spot, a little more experience. The guys have had a few more years in the weight room and stuff like that, and Coppin coming back first time in a few years, new staff, new administration, and you can tell the difference in a program that's ascending in Coppin and a program that's already where they're trying to get to in Mason.
Right. Well, one of the things I like, and I don't mean to fault the Coppin State ball carrier on this, but it made me remember that when you're playing at the next level, this is college football. This isn't high school. And I know that a lot of these running backs that come over were fast enough wherever they played in high school to run backwards and either out juke or beat somebody to a sideline by running backwards or do something. But in this league, that gets you eaten up alive. I mean, if you do it habitually, it might work once or twice out of 10 times. But those other 8 or 9 times, your coach is dogging you in your ear saying, why the hell did you run backwards? And this is
sometimes you got to take your loss, even if it's a 1 or 2 yard loss. You got to live to fight another day, and 1 or 2 yard loss better than a 6 or 7 yard loss.
Yeah, I don't know if that's an overestimation on a ball carrier's aptitude or an underestimate on what defenses in this league are able to do, but you see it shine when the defense just eats it alive. They're running backwards. All right, so I'm going to switch over. We've got one highlight from Toledo, and I've got a setup for it. Give me a moment to cue it up. All right, so this is the Toledo highlight. They just finished getting the film this morning. They got a clip here of a junior outside linebacker, Brody, getting a pick 6 on defense. It's the first time he's scored in a football game since his JV year in high school many years ago, so it was a special moment for him that the team wanted to share. Let's take a look at it.
Check it out. It's gonna be a long defensive touchdown, that's for sure.
You could see it on the right side of the screen there.
Yep. And there he goes, 60-yard interception return. See how excited he is at the end. Nice looking athlete though. Stout, compact guy. He's got some muscle to him. So.
Yep, great job.
Unfortunately, we missed the celebration. He's just about to do his dance. We miss it. That camera work.
You could tell it at this moment right here.
Yep.
Yep, and
got to be careful though. NCAA rules that could be a penalty. So it depends on the ref crew, but
yeah,
they're not as liberal as the NFL has become.
Yeah, I remember Robert Morris was flagged for doing this right around the 8 or 9 yard line, and that pinched him pretty hard in 2014.
Yeah, it all depends on how
old
school the ref is usually.
Yeah, and at this point the game was out of hand. I'm sure there might have been more of a discussion if it was a 1 or 2 score game, but I think that might have even been the last point scored in that game.
Gotcha. Yeah, really nice win for Toledo. I know we don't have any more highlights other than that, but Oakland is not any team to take lightly. So for Toledo to come in there and do what they did is very impressive.
Updated power rankings. So this is your top 10 to close the season. These power rankings are going to change hands. Power rankings are affected after the week of conference championships, but to end the season, this is your top 10 to end the season. Not much movement here on the top end. We've got Ohio State and Gordon State still duking it out for first place votes. Sacred Heart at 3rd, Michigan State at 4th. You've got Mason, Columbus State, Toledo, Oakland, Central Georgia, and Milwaukee just cracking that top 10.
Yeah, I think those have been the teams that are have been in the discussion. Those are there's really 9 teams there that have a feasible shot at possibly getting the 4th seed. I know Coppin only has 2 losses as well, so they're kind of in that mix. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens this week. And I know we're going to talk about that in a minute. But power rankings pretty similar to what they were last week. And like you said, they're probably going to shake up a little bit. But at minimum on Monday, we should get a post here coming soon from our social media. But we're going to do a live selection show on Monday afternoon. So it's going to be pretty cool. So a special edition of Suite 301 on Monday.
Very cool. So let's just start off. We're going to go one by one. Usually we list all the games for the upcoming week, but this week we're going to switch it up and give give every matchup their day in the sunshine. This is a rematch, is it not?
This is a rematch, but I hope that Coach Jones is stressing that this is not going to be the same George Mason team walking into, Sacred Heart's football field as they saw, 6, 7 weeks ago. But it is a rematch for a game that Sacred Heart won, I think, by 2 points, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and the common the common argument against Sacred Heart, and it's through no fault of their own, is that by this time in the season they really haven't played anybody. But they did play George Mason this year. They actually rectified that issue with their scheduling because Sacred Heart was always the victim of a lot of forfeits, unfortunately
Yep.
for them, and it would always affect their power ranking, or it would inflate their power rankings as games played, even though they didn't play the games they were forfeits. They would still kind of benefit from that, even though they didn't have the boots on the ground experience to actually play and get experience and get better in those games.
Sure.
So they played Mason this year. Sacred Heart, overcame Mason. So Mason's got some payback coming, but also this is the chance for Sacred Heart to actually prove that the North Atlantic goes through them and they need to retain it. I think the last team that did not, or the last team that wasn't Sacred Heart that won the North Atlantic Conference was Eastern Connecticut in 2016, I believe. So
Yeah. And I don't think Sacred Heart was even in the league. Or maybe that was our first year in the league, 2016.
no, they were in before that.
Okay.
They got beat by Eastern Connecticut. They had really good running backs that year. They had like a thunder and lightning kind of style running back, and
Yeah, because
um,
2017 is when they won the national championship, I believe. So
yep, yeah. I remember that because Oakland was going to Erie, Pennsylvania to play who we thought was going to be Sacred Heart, and they were upset by Eastern Connecticut. So
gotcha.
that was an interesting year. And then the next year, Sacred Heart came back to win it all. So
Whatever.
interesting. And Mason's always in the picture too from year to year. So this could have just as well been last year's national championship had the votes gone that way. So
Yeah, I think that's what Sacred Heart's been kind of stressing all year is them along with Gordon State both felt a little bit slighted that they didn't get the opportunity to play. We had no playoffs last year, so I think they're very excited about this. But Mason is playing really good football right now. Athletes all over the place. But the interesting thing is, I don't think they'll out athlete Sacred Hearts. So that's when it's going to come down to those little things, and it's going to be a play, 4 or 5 plays that are going to that determine who wins this game. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
and as I recall, both of these teams are that big playability. I know Sacred Heart usually has like a tall receiver for a deep ball. I know George Mason has some shutdown defense and just big plays, offense and defense. So this might come down to either who gets the luckiest on the big plays or who can take advantage of the other team's mistakes. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think mistakes will be huge. Mason has that just fantastic defensive line with Gabriel Gibson leading the charge there, and then Sacred Heart always has a good offensive line. So I think that's going to be a big matchup to look at. Is Sacred Heart never has a big offensive line, but they're always very good technique and good players. So I think that'll help dictate that. Along to your point of mistakes are going to be huge because I anticipate this being a close game.
All right, Dave, who do you got for this game?
Oh, I'm picking right now. I don't even get a chance to think about it. Holy moly. This is such a tough one because Mason has been playing so good. But I really have a lot of respect for what Sacred Heart has built in North Atlantic, what Coach Jones has helped there. And I think I'm going to take Sacred Heart with the home field advantage to take that victory and secure their spot in the playoff.
I think that Sacred Heart is favored to win this game. Like if there was a Vegas line, I think that it would be
Probably
Sacred
three and a
Heart.
half home field advantage type of thing.
Yeah, and they played earlier in the season. Like all fingers point to Sacred Heart, but I'm a fan of the underdog as usual. I'm gonna go with Mason to make some surprises, just to ruffle the feathers a little bit. Let's see what happens with that. Moving on to the Great Lakes. This game has been set for a while. Great Lakes Conference Championship, Michigan State versus number one Ohio State. Number four versus number one for the Great Lakes Championship.
Yeah, I mean this is an incredible matchup, and I think Michigan State talked to those guys a little bit. Uh, Coach Coach Beach, both Coach Beaches, Jonathan and Mark. they really feel like they're the second best team in the country, and they feel like Ohio State right now is the best team in the country, and they lost to Ohio State, and they would beat anybody else you put in front of them. So they are very motivated to go out and play better against Ohio State this time than they did the last time. They understand it's going to be a tough game to beat them, but they think they can. So I think what Michigan State's been doing the last 3-4 weeks with some really big wins, a nice win versus Oakland, a really big shutout win versus a Toledo offense that was scoring points on everybody else. I think it's going to be an interesting game. Ohio State obviously has been running through everybody, Division III opponents included. So we shall see what happens. I'm not going to spoil the pick here, but I'm going to struggle to not pick Ohio State. I mean, they're just really, what they're doing this year has been pretty incredible.
To give some historical context of this Great Lakes Conference Championship, I think 2015, I believe that a Michigan team has taken the Great Lakes Conference since 2014. I believe that Michigan State won the Great Lakes Conference in 2015. Maybe they, or no, maybe that was Miami, Ohio. I think Miami,
Ohio, because they won a national title.
Yeah, and that was a ranked one.
Or they lost in the national title game. Excuse me.
Yeah, that was the year. That was the year before the brackets.
Yep.
So
they lost to Middle Georgia.
Yep. So that 2015 was the last year a Michigan team didn't win the Great Lakes Conference Championship. 2014 before that was OU, and then 2013 was Robert Morris.
Sure.
So again, Ohio State's favored to win. I think that the key to this game is going to be to isolate that quarterback, keep him from using his legs, and try and get him to make some high-risk throws, or just keep their offense off the field. I'm not if Michigan State can sustain long drives.
Yeah, I think that's the key for Michigan State is ball control, and not only sustain long drives and keep the ball keep moving the ball and sustain drives. Make Ohio State work for their yards. Don't let them hit the big play. Don't let Gerenstein run for 20, 25-yard clip on a scramble. That might mean you're playing soft, deep coverage and coming up and tackling. I don't necessarily think that's a Michigan State kind of MO. They're a very aggressive defense. They like to bring pressure. So we'll see how they decide to come through that. But I think those two things will, understanding that Ohio State has the best offense in the league, maybe the best offense in the history of the NCFA, you maybe have to make some caveats of, okay, maybe I'm going to change what I have done to try to stop this offense a little different.
Yeah, I know that halftime adjustments are important in any football game, but when that score is out of hand, those halftime adjustments are too little too late. So they're going to have to figure out a way to make adjustments on the sidelines during the game after possessions, increase communication. What an interesting challenge to have, though, just to get that second chance, and what a statement it would make for the Spartans to beat Ohio State. I know that earlier in the week they had Coach Izzo, for those of you who don't know and care about college basketball, D1 college basketball. Michigan State's very own Coach Izzo came to their practice field earlier this week and had some things to say to the MSU Spartan Club football team, and that it seems like that was pretty inspiring. So maybe that was just the bit of magic they need to get over this hump.
Yeah, I thought that was incredible. I did see that. I think last night or this morning they shared it on their social media. That's pretty awesome to have, a future. He may already be in the Hall of Fame. I'm not sure, but at minimum, a future Hall of Fame coach who's won a ton of games and championships at Michigan State to be there to cheer those guys on and give them a little pep talk. But this ends up being a really huge game for Michigan State. Obviously, if they win, they automatically punch their ticket. But if they lose, they become, another one of the two lost teams. So, it's not going to be a given that if they lose, they get that fourth spot. It's going to be interesting how things play out. So,
well, Ohio State's been ranked number 1 all season. They could probably start their third stringer and lose the game, and then be the number 4 seed because they're undefeated.
Yeah, I think all three. The thing that we can maybe talk more about this at the very end, but the thing that will really throw a wrench in this is if all three undefeateds win. If one of the undefeateds loses, one of the favored, whether that's Ohio State, Gordon State undefeated in conference play, or Sacred, the high probability they'll slide to that 4th spot based on the power ranking only having 1 loss. But if they all win, now you have all these teams with 2 losses, which is going to be wild.
Right. We've got one game left to talk about, but first, what do you got?
I mean, I only picked against Michigan State once all year, and the time I picked against them was Toledo, and I looked like a fool. Otherwise, I picked them to win every single game the rest of the year. I can't pick against Ohio State. I mean, what they're doing is incredible. I mean, this is the best offensive football we've ever seen probably in the NCFA. And people aren't scoring a lot of points on them. Now, that could be their defense is also really good, or teams just totally blow their game plan out because they're down 28-0 in the first quarter, and they just start chucking the ball down the field. Who knows? But what the scores Ohio State's been doing against NCFA teams, including beating the pants off of Michigan State earlier in the year, and what they did against the Division III program, winning that game by over 20. Anybody who picks against Ohio State is just a homer for the other team or whatever, but there's no way you can pick against what they've done so far.
Right. Yeah, I think that the Spartans need the support more than Ohio State does. They're favored to win, and again, I like the underdog. Being in Michigan right now, and this is a Cinderella season, I think, for Michigan State. I'm going to go with Michigan State and just see if they can, pull a surprise, because I think that everybody in the nation has Ohio State heavily favored. But the Michiganders are going to support the Michiganders. We'll see what happens.
It'll be a good game.
South Atlantic, we've got the Columbus State Cougars at Gordon State. Columbus State, I think, has been kind of shaky. I think that, and I don't want to discredit them at all, but they seem like the most shaky of all the teams in these conference playoffs, like not maybe the least solid. I don't want to put them in the same, category as like a Coppin State or somebody who may like turn up and not perform as expected. But it seems like all the other teams in this race are just solid beyond belief. And Cougars, I think, still has some questions.
Yeah, I would say if you rank these 6 teams, and I think the power rankings would show that they're the lowest ranked team. I do think, although the score wasn't great, they played Gordon State pretty good the first time they played them. And talking to their coach at Columbus State, Coach Spate, he says that's the worst game they played all year. And part of that probably is because Gordon State's good. They've put you into some MAs or some missed assignments and some unforced errors. They caused that by being so good. But part of that could have been, wide-eyed, young team at Columbus State, playing the big dogs. I would like to think they'd be better at this point in the season. So, they definitely are the lowest under the radar team of these 6 in the conference championships, but I do think they have the athletes to compete with anybody and can come out here and beat Gordon State.
And Gordon State just looks solid. I think that they're the only team that looked more impressive than Mason this year. Everybody expected high performance from Ohio State. But Gordon State, even though they had a solid season last year, they came out and impressed. And they've been getting first place votes every single week. So it's probably them and one other South Atlantic team. Who knows?
I was just going to say this. They don't have our voting panel's 12 this year. There's nobody from Gordon State on the voting panel. So it's not even them voting for themselves.
Impressive.
So it's 2 other people. I think Columbus has voted him number 1 quite a few times, but there's other people not even in the South Atlantic that are voting for them. So I think it's impressive. And they've been impressive. We've seen a lot of film on them. They have some really great athletes. I really like their quarterback, Neil Howard, very elusive lefty quarterback. Some of the other guys, Jack Donovan and Kellen Garrison, get a lot of credit from the Great Lakes teams. But I think Neil Howard is one of the best quarterbacks in this league. And the film we see of him in the stat lines, show that. So do I think Columbus is going to go in here and knock the pants off of Gordon? Not a chance, but I do think they can be competitive. But at the end of the day, I think Gordon State sees this as just another stepping stone. They, like Sacred Heart last year, upset they didn't get the opportunity. They thought they were maybe the best team in the league last year. So they're looking forward. I think their whole season has been looking forward from this point on. Like everything else was a formality to get to here, win this game, get to the playoffs, and try to prove that they are the best team in the league. So their only loss coming to Georgia Military College, which is a top 10 ranked junior college in the country. That's the only loss they've had, and that's really every win of theirs. This has been by pretty large margin. I think it was like a 30-point swing or 29 points against Columbus State the first time.
I think this is going to be my lock of the week. Gordon State over Columbus.
Yeah, I'm going to take Gordon State too. I really appreciate what Coach Spake does down there with Columbus State, and I think the South Atlantic Conference is a growing conference. Gordon State's good. Columbus State's gotten a lot better from where they were 4 or 5 years ago. They've really proved to be in a close to a powerhouse program. Central Georgia Tech has come in and been a respectable first-year team. So I think the South Atlantic is growing with some strong teams. We have had a lot of influx of teams in and out of the South Atlantic over the last 3 or 4 years, come in for a year and leave. But I do think Gordon is for sure the cream of the crop there, and is going to prove that on Saturday night.
And then the afterbirth. What happens after Saturday? You have any one of those 3 teams that's currently ranked number 1 through number 6 at the site of a loss on Saturday. They're then in that pool of guys, or that pool of teams, praying to stay at that number 4 spot. And then, of course, the long shots. Toledo's the most deserving out of any of the long shot teams. There's no way that Oakland would get it and not Toledo, or that Central Georgia Tech can get it and not Toledo. But if you're looking for a team that is not in these conference championship conversations to actually hopefully through coaches voting or whatever, to rise and ascend to that number 4 spot through the grace of magic and good luck, I think that would have to be Toledo. But if not, we're looking at one of those top 1 through 6 teams that are currently in the power ranking.
Yeah, most definitely. I think what Toledo would need to have happened first off. I agree with you that Oakland's probably doesn't have much of a chance. Central Georgia, Milwaukee, Coppin State technically have a chance, but I don't think it's a very viable chance. Powerball type lottery winning chance of making it. But Toledo, I think if all 3 teams that are favored win, the number 1, the hosts all win, I think Toledo could have a shot at that added then, because then you'll have all 2-loss teams fighting. Mason will be a 2-loss team. Michigan State will be a 2-loss team. Columbus State will be a 2-loss team at that point. And then Toledo jumps in there as just another 2-loss team. So then it could get a little bit tricky. If any of the top seeds lose, I think it's without a doubt, with being 1 loss, they slide into that 4th spot over the 2 losses teams. Now it's an algorithm. It's old school BCS. We saw it last year with what happened. I can't dictate what's going to happen when Sandy puts it all into the computer and puts all the data in and spits out what's going to happen. But I think your point there is most likely it's going to be the loser of the Great Lakes or the North Atlantic game that slides into that 4th spot. Now, if Mason and Michigan State both lose, again, both those teams are going to – one of those teams is going to be really disappointed they didn't get the shot, because they're both really, really good football teams.
Right. But, Gordon's ranked number 2, and I've got a hard time believing if they started their backup center at quarterback and laid a goose egg to rest their number 1 and number 2 quarterbacks or whatever, that I've got a hard time thinking that if they lost that they would fall below 4. That's a big,
I don't think any of those teams would fall below 4 if they lose. I just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Technically, if Gordon would be a 2-loss team at that point, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, it would be too big of a gamble to do that. I mean, even what's funny about the season right now is that Ohio State can technically afford to lose the conference championship and still be ranked high enough to be a wild card in the playoffs. So I think that,
I think Sacred Heart too probably would be able to do that with no losses yet.
Sure, but games played is 25% of it, and coaches poll is 25% of it too. I'd have a hard time, as a voter, I'd have a hard time voting in Sacred Heart based on the games played and the way that they would lose.
That's the whole part of it too. Is Do you lose big? Is it a close game? That kind of stuff. Like, does Ohio State go out and beat Michigan State by 35? Then the voters are like, well, and Mason loses by 4. And then the voters go, well, Mason had a better game. But do they weigh that of, well, Ohio State we think is better than Sacred Heart? And it's just, there's so many variables that, most of them are out of the control of the teams. Games played, you could have obviously saw that and filled your schedule, but coaches voting poll is there's 12 people vote every week. Those 12 people, Michigan State votes, Ohio State votes, Sacred Heart votes, Mason has a vote on there, Columbus votes. Gordon State does not have a voter, so 5 of the 6 teams there are partaking in votes.
And don't get me wrong, if you're
everybody had an opportunity to be on it, and those are the only 12 that wanted it. We originally wanted like 18 to 20.
Yeah, and don't misunderstand me. There's not a team that's playing for a trophy on Saturday that's going to play off. It's just funny. It's just funny to think about the possibilities. But every single team that's playing on Saturday wants to, flatten the team on that other sideline. Make no bones about it. This is going to be a fantastic week for football. It's going to be exciting. I'm expecting some high-scoring football games. I'm not expecting any 9-0 down in the dirt kind of scores. Almost all these teams put up points like a pinball machine. So I would almost, if we had more time to think about it, Dave, I would almost want to think about how many points total will be scored this weekend. If you add
I know
up,
it's supposed to be bad weather. I don't know what it's like in the East, but I think Midwest is supposed to get a real cold blast coming in. I don't know if that's going to hit Ohio or not, but first really cold weather of the season here with 20s and 30 degrees, at least kind of in this Midwest where I'm at. So
right.
It could be interesting. I don't know what that means for the Northeast, what the weather's going to be like.
I mean,
were crazy last weekend. So
Ohio State's good for 50. Michigan State's good for at least 35. Gordon State's good for at least 35-42.
Are you saying the score is going to be Ohio State 50, Michigan State 35? Are you changing your pick?
No, I'm just saying that I'm spotting them that many points. And if their defense steps up, maybe Ohio State will score 28. But, in terms of average scores, it would have been nice to have a slide about this. Man, I suck. It would have been nice to have an average score just to see what that would look like for these teams. Because
I will tell you this, because it was on Toledo's graphic, a really nice graphic. If you don't follow Toledo social media, whoever they have doing their graphics does a really nice job. It's a really nice graphic. The only team with a greater margin of victory in all their wins is Ohio State. Toledo's second in that category. So I don't know where anybody else falls in, because I didn't see their whole thing, but they figured out for all the teams. I don't know if they did everybody, but the teams that have significant wins, and they finished second. So
yeah,
check out Toledo's stuff. It's good stuff.
That brings up another question that might play itself out on Saturday. What do teams do when they're not blowing out the other team? How does that sideline react when it's a close game and stuff's falling apart and adjustments aren't being made or people are getting beat? It's a 1 or 2 point game, or maybe it's a 7-point game or a 10-point game. You have to be emotionally intelligent and reel that in on the sidelines. When you're used to blowing out teams 35-0 and you're losing, 10-14 and it's the third quarter, people get anxious.
No, we've seen that. We talked a little bit about 2016 national title game. That's where Oakland beat Middle Georgia, who had come into that championship game, had beaten everybody by 40, and then all of a sudden, very physical offensive and defensive Oakland team comes in there, and I think that's what happened in that game. We've seen games like that where big time favorites come in, they score tons of points in everybody, they're used to blowing out, and they face a little bit more adversity than they're used to, and they kind of crumble. So I'm not saying Ohio State's going to crumble or Gordon's going to crumble or not, but I think that's a good point that Ohio State hasn't faced a lot of adversity in that aspect. They lost their quarterback for a while. They've had some other things. They've had some forfeits they've had to deal with. People didn't want to play them for whatever reason. But they haven't had that, hey, it's a tough game, it's a close game. What are we going to do? This play's really important. Or, oh, we had a 3-and-out, or we had a block punt. What's going to happen? They've kind of been rolling through everything.
Yeah, there's 6 teams in the NCFA right now that think they have a plan for Saturday, and 3 of those plans are going to falter. Michigan State has a plan to beat Ohio State. George Mason has a plan right now to beat Sacred Heart. Columbus State has a
Yeah,
plan right now to beat Gordon State. What that
this is
plan
where I
is,
wish we had we were a larger group and we could fly to the games and broadcast them or something and just see them because I want to
right?
watch all these games. I want to be able to watch them all. I think there are going to be three outstanding football games this weekend with six great programs, three really good games to watch. It's going to be exciting.
Yep. So we'll be back next week to talk about the winners of these conference championships and also to talk about, and next week's podcast will be released after the big Monday announcement of the wildcard team.
Yeah, so big week for NCFA media next week. Monday we're going to do a Sweet 301. Sandy and I will be live. I think it's going to be noon Eastern, and we're going to release the power rankings. We're getting all the votes in Sunday night, so we can do it Monday morning, release it. Obviously, the highest ranked non-conference champion is going to be the fourth seed in the playoffs. Tuesday is the monthly Sweet 301, so we'll get a little NCFA boost on there, and then Nick and I will record our podcast to talk through that on Wednesday and release it on Thursday. So you got a lot of content next week to hold you over. Also, other thing is that after the conference championship game next week, All-American ballots will go out too. So
Great. It's an exciting time for college club football. So stay connected. Make sure that you view all the media that's going to be coming out and just stay on board with us throughout the rest of the season. And join us next week for another NCFA podcast. Take care.